Trump admits 2020 defeat and flips yet again on abortion. More high-level former Trump officials have come out against him, including his former vice president. And new polls show a growing gender divide. And other great news for Vice President Harris. And of course, we'll look ahead to next week's debate. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54. Stephen, welcome back to the podcast.
Excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Well, I think Jason, he did not say this to me, but I'm just going to surmise that given all of the MAGA adjacent news coming out of the Kansas City Chiefs, that he's ducking me on this podcast. And so
he's fled the country, I believe.
Yeah, he's fled the country. Just a lot of inconvenient stuff out there, Chiefs fans. I'm not going to get into it here. But I do think that there's a further discussion and investigation warranted here.
Hey, as a Bills fan, this is your Super Bowl win.
Yes, it is. We don't have any MAGA people. Don't Google that. Don't Google that.
New York. Don't.
All right. Well, welcome back, Stephen. We don't need to reintroduce you. Everybody knows who you are, and we'll get to all the fun opinions that you have. I think a good place to start here is that Trump went on Lex Friedman's podcast. And look, I don't know if you watch any Lex Friedman. He's controversial interview style because he doesn't really push his guests too much, which depending on what you like in your interviews either works or it doesn't. I would say in this interview, it really didn't work. But Trump made sort of news when he said something about the 2020 election. Let's go to this clip.
How do you think you'll do in the debate coming up? It's in a few days.
So I've done a lot of debating, only as a politician. I never debated. My first debate was the Rosie O'Donnell debate, right? The famous Rosie O'Donnell debate, the answer. But I've done well with debates. I mean, I became president. Then the second time I got millions more votes than I got the first time. So I was told if I got 63 million, which is what I got the first time, you would win. You can't not win. And I got millions of more votes than that and lost by a whisker. And look what happened to the world with all of the wars and all of the problems.
So lost by a whisker, right? That's what people are focusing on and saying, did Trump finally admit he lost the 2020 election? And some people are like, oh, this must have been a verbal slip or whatever. But I went down this rabbit hole, and actually he said this quite a bit over the past week. This is a clip of him over the weekend at the Moms for Liberty conference.
This was the last, I mean, honestly, we got millions of more votes than we did in the first election. We did great in the first one, we won. And I was told we got 63 million votes in the first election. I was told if we get 63 million votes, same number, there's no way we can be defeated. I got 10 or 12 million votes more than that, more than anybody had ever got. We got the most votes of anybody, of any sitting president in history. And he beat us by a whisker. And it was a terrible thing. They used COVID.
And one more clip here. This is Trump in Arizona at a news conference.
This was the last week in office for me because of a horrible, horrible election where I got many millions more votes than I got the first time. But didn't quite make it, just a little bit short. We got to clean up our borders. We have to clean up our elections, or we're not going to have a country.
So this feels deliberate to me, Stephen. Now, it's possible that his brain is just broken and he just kind of has this line that he keeps repeating. But my sense is this is actually deliberate. And I can think of two reasons for why Trump is doing this.
Yeah, tell me why you think that.
Number one is the election stealing stuff actually really hurts your turnout. So like constantly telling your people it's rigged actually disempowers people from going to the ballot box. And I think that was an obvious problem that he had last time. I think the second part is, and we'll hold the abortion discussion for a second because we're going to talk about that, like his flip on abortion. But this does feel in line with the same strategy that he attempted and largely failed at with flipping his position on abortion, which is if you look at the 2022 exit polling data, Dobbs was by far the biggest problem that Republicans had and why they underperformed relative to the polls and all expectations. But also in the crosstabs, there was a lot of there were a lot of issues with Trump back candidates and core democracy issues. Candidates like Mastriano and the candidate in New Hampshire against Maggie Hassan, right? These were candidates that really got clobbered. And I think a smart analysis of that election is like, look, Dobbs number one for sure, but certainly democracy issues were weighing down Trump back candidates in that election. And I suspect it's possible that some people are taking a look at Trump and it's showing up in their focus groups that his language around the election being stolen is a real problem for him.
Yeah. So first off, I would think the argument that his brain is broken and that it's intentional are not mutually exclusive. I believe both of those things.
Yeah.
I think to your first point, it's really we've seen about deterring turnout. If you tell your supporters, hey, this is rigged, it's stolen, there's nothing we can do, the deep state's going to steal it anyway, then why would you go out of your way to vote? And I think we've seen that even with mail-in ballots, right? When he hammers away about, don't mail in ballots. And then it actually backfires because then the Republicans are less likely to mail in ballots and they miss election day and they don't get their vote counted. So I think you're definitely right. It just in that sense, in that strategic sense. And then second, I think you're also right on, he's trying to soften the edges on issues that, and we'll expand on this here in a second, that he's on the wrong side of the American public, and the American public doesn't believe the big lie. They've seen through it, and he's been holding it together to try to get through the primaries and try to keep the Republican Party with him. But now as it's slipping away, he's doing whatever he can, thrashing about wildly, trying to get back on the majority side. I also just think it's funny whenever somebody says, I got the most votes ever, like there aren't more people in the country voting every year. Like that is kind of how this works, is almost every single election, whoever is running gets more votes than the people did last time because there's just more humans voting.
Yeah, I think, imagine what Hillary Clinton thinks when she got the most votes ever. Yeah. So, what's fascinating here, I had this long debate with two of my friends over the weekend before Trump flipped back on abortion, which we're going to talk about how much pressure does he really face from his right flank. And it's an open question, right? There are people out there that I really respect, including my friend on the other side of this debate, who on the abortion question was like, they'll always be loyal to Trump. There's nothing you do like that would, push his own supporters away. And I was like, you could be right, but actually we've never run this experiment on abortion before. In our lifetime, we've never had a truly mixed position at the top of the Republican ticket on the abortion issues. And so you really would be testing the untestable, which Trump has a fairly good track record on with the Republican base, but we just don't know. We'll get to abortion again. I keep saying that. But on the question of democracy issues, he is facing some pressure. I don't want to overstate it, from some of the more right-wing figures in his flank. I hesitate to play any Nick Fuentes since he's a known white supremacist, but in the interest of just understanding what's happening on the right here, let's play this clip of how Nick Fuentes reacted to this.
They sold out. They sold out. Everything that MAGA represented at one point and everything that it was is no longer. It's just really sad. And the 2020 comment, it's like, wow, that's how pathetic it's gotten. He's admitting, he says, oh, I lost by a whisker. So what was the point? Like, what's the point of any of it? You lost in 2020? Seriously? I mean, what are we even doing anymore? Then you're a loser. Then you're a loser. You just lost. Then you lost to Joe Biden. You deserve to be charged. If he admits that he lost, then that actually vindicates the DOJ charge against him. Because the charge is that he knew he lost, but he lied to defraud the people. That's the DOJ's charge.
Stephen, I don't know if I'd ever thought I would utter this sentence, but I agree with everything Nick Fuentes just said.
Watching him figure it out in real time is incredible. It's like, yes, that's exactly it. That's it. That's right. He lied to you. He played you as a fool. He used you. He used everybody on January 6th. The clip goes on. He talks about the 1,600 people who've been arrested. Trump used all of them. He lied to all of them. He manipulated all of them. And exactly, that is why he's been charged. And watching him figure it out in real time is, again, you hate to even give any sort of credit, but it's kind of delightful, actually.
Yeah. I mean, there's literally not a word that he uttered in that sentence that I disagree with, or that clip. Well, let's go to abortion, where truly interesting things have happened over the course of the past week. And Trump was really, as John Levitt says, testing the fences here, and he got zapped. Let's go to this first clip where Trump, uttered some words that kind of set a whole cycle in motion.
Does.
You
I think
overturned Roe, and you want abortion to be a states' rights issue. In Florida, the state that you are a resident of, there's an abortion-related amendment on the ballot to overturn the 6-week ban in Florida. How are you going to vote on that?
Well, I think the 6 week is too short. It has to be more time, and so and I've told them that I want more weeks.
So you'll vote in favor of the amendment?
I am going to be voting that we need more than 6 weeks.
Okay, so he says in that clip, he says, I will be voting in favor of more than 6 weeks, which is a yes vote, right? That's what he says in that clip.
Yeah, and to be clear, Stephen, explain what yes vote means for people who don't follow the Florida abortion ballot measure.
Well, just that there's a ballot initiative in Florida to expand abortion access. And so it's going to a vote of the people. I think I'm not as familiar with the Florida law. I think they have to get to 60%. In Missouri, it's only 50. I'm not 100% sure about that. But so as a Florida resident now, because he famously fled New York, and he'll have an opportunity to vote on this. And so
perhaps for the last time, he may get disenfranchised soon.
Right.
Yeah.
People are asking, well, okay, you're a Florida resident now. How are you going to vote? And so because it's a ballot initiative, a yes vote would expand abortion access. And he says in that clip that he will be voting to expand it, which is the yes vote. In that clip, that's what he says.
Yes, and he faced like tremendous pressure from the right. So one user on X said Trump has destroyed both the conservative movement and pro-life movement. He's done what even Barack Obama couldn't do. Mike Pence tweeted, I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. Eric Erickson, the right-wing radio host, tweeted, instead of having all the focus on Kamala Harris interview tonight, Trump decided to further divide the GOP. Not a good strategy for winning. Well, Trump got the message. Just a few days later, he did an interview. Here's what he had to say.
You voting yes or no on Amendment 4 in Florida?
So I think 6 weeks, you need more time than 6 weeks. I've disagreed with that right from the early primaries. When I heard about it, I disagreed with it. At the same time, the Democrats are radical because the 9 months is just a ridiculous situation where you can do an abortion in the 9th month. And, you know, some of the states like Minnesota and other states have it where you could actually execute the baby after birth. And all of that stuff is unacceptable. So I'll be voting no for that reason.
We can't execute babies after birth anymore.
Just flat out. I mean, just to be completely clear, he's just flat out lying in this clip, right? It's a flat out lie. Shocker.
Yeah.
But also, it's the opposite of what he just said in the interview we just played right before that.
Yeah. And so I don't, I'm glad, one variant of our politics that I'm glad is behind us is the Trump is the political genius version of political commentary, which seemed to dominate for so long, that he's like this wily guy. This was very true in the lead up to 2020. I think people had to see him lose in order to understand that he's not infallible.
Or that he's some truth teller that's out there just telling people the hard truths as it is. Like, he clearly is not, because he's saying things all over the place. Right.
And I think like the sort of what we were grappling with over the weekend before he flipped was, well, there's this untested sense, like theoretically, you want to move to the middle, right? It's what Harris is doing, right? But I think the challenge for Trump is twofold. One is there's a limit to what issues you moderate on, right? If Kamala Harris started saying, you know what, I'm actually not as pro-choice as I've said before, that would be a lot harder to pull off than her fracking position, for example. Like, there's just certain issues that trump other issues. In the case of abortion choice, reproductive rights, and also core democracy issues, which has become so central to Trump, it's really hard to backtrack on things that are so central to your identity. And that also people feel very aggrieved about. You've bragged about it, like, openly up until very, very recently. And which gets to the second problem Trump has, which is he'll brag about it again. That's the problem. He'll flip on his position, and then he'll brag about the Supreme Court justices he appointed because he has no discipline. And people see that and they're like, okay, I totally understand what's happening here. And so my position, even before he flipped, was that he was going to get limited benefit from this and potentially extreme costs for this flip. And I only believe that more because he's flipped, which means he loses all the moderation that he got, but he now is being viewed by the public as a chaotic figure, which he's given plenty of evidence for, and somebody who is unscrupulous.
It's also somebody who has no values, right? Like, at some point, there has to be some core things that you believe in. And Trump has never had any core things that he believes in. And he doesn't understand the policy. I mean, understanding if you're going to change your position, if you're going to moderate your position, if you're going to describe the nuance in your position, it helps to actually understand the policy that you're talking about. And he doesn't have the slightest clue about any policies at all, which makes it difficult for him to figure out sort of where that line of what his base would tolerate is. But also, he has no core values, which is I think a lot of us have been very clear on this the entire time, but it's being exposed to a whole new group of people. And this has always been the bargain that the far right and the religious right made with Donald Trump, which was that he wasn't one of them. He didn't believe the things that they believe, but he was a vehicle by which they could implement the policies they want. And now the problem is, when that bargain seems to be falling apart and Trump is panicking, he's going to jettison those values. And the people that are using him to get what they want aren't going to be particularly loyal to him because they don't believe in the issues or any sort of principles or things that they're trying to achieve. And so it can unwind very quickly when it's such a transaction relationship, which is what this has been for 8 years.
Right. Well, yeah. And the other thing that occurs to me as we're talking is Trump doesn't do traditional debate prep, but I wonder whether some of what we're picking up on in his public stances is coming through debate prep. Like, it's perhaps like some of these are things that they were practicing that he would say on the debate stage that are creeping into his public discourse, just
floating these ideas, like what's the reaction if I kind of say,
but I'm not even saying it's deliberate. I'm just saying, like, he's being fed these in prep, and he's so used to saying these lines that he's being like, they're just spilling out of him as he's doing these interviews.
He doesn't know what to do with the facts that are in his head.
Yeah, that's a theory. Well,
one other point on that, we talk about these millions of votes and not knowing what you're like. At the end of the day, this is really about a handful of swing states, right? And so if a couple thousand people in Pennsylvania or in Wisconsin or in Arizona, where they've been doing all this Kerry Lake crazy, if a couple thousand people there get disillusioned or get angry, that has a tremendous impact on this election. It's not about winning by 4 or 5 million votes. It's about winning certain states by a single vote, and that makes it more difficult on him.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that was what, in my discussion over the weekend, that was the thing I was grappling with, is that I am not an evangelical. I am not somebody who has an interpretation of religion that yields the same abortion position that some of his supporters do. Mm-hmm. And for those reasons, it's hard for me to predict how somebody who does have those beliefs would react to what Trump has said. I know that there's a lot of reason for cynicism, but when you're talking about core beliefs, there is a risk of taking people, just going too far and asking too much of your supporters. And I think that's what Trump attempted to test over the past week, and obviously learned something to make him pull back. Well, we're going to take a break and hear some ads. When we come back, we're going to talk about a ton of stuff happening in Trump's world, including Mike Pence jumping into the fray, John Kelly jumping into the fray, McCain's son. We're also going to talk about some promising polls that came out over the past week, and then we're going to look ahead to the debates. This episode is sponsored by Rhone. If you're like me, you understand the pains of finding what to wear. Most clothes are uncomfortable. They may be too tight. They never, actually fit your size because, a lot of us are not exactly small, medium, large, extra large. We're complicated. Sometimes when you find something you like, you can only wear it for a few hours before that important meeting or dinner, and then you have to change it into something else. And everyone wants to dress their best. You want to look good at all times. And frankly, it's a confidence booster. So here's the deal. Men's closets were due for a radical reinvention, and Rhone stepped up to the challenge. Rhone's commuter collection is the most comfortable, breathable, and flexible set of products known to man, and here's why. Rhone helps you get ready for any occasion with the commuter collection, which offers the world's most comfortable pants, dress shirts, quarter zips, and polos. You never have to worry about what to wear when you have the Rhone commuter collection. And here's some anecdote. I'm wearing my Rhone pants right now, and last week I was at a wedding. I wore my Rhone button-down shirt to the wedding at a formal wedding, and I will also wear it tomorrow when I just go into a coffee shop to have a meeting. It's that versatile. So it's time to feel confident without the hassle with Rhone's wrinkle release technology. Wrinkles disappear as you stretch and wear the products. It's that easy. Yeah, I actually not so neatly folded that shirt in my bag for the wedding, and I was able to take it out and automatically I was able to put it on. It looked like I'd ironed it, but I didn't. It's an inside secret between us. So with Gold Fusion anti-odor technology, you'll also be smelling fresh and clean all day. On top of that, Rhone is 100% machine washable, so you can dish the dry cleaner all together. We're on the move a lot, and the Rhone Commuter Collection has never let me down. The versatility and overall comfort of the collection is undefeated. I absolutely love it. And even after I wear it all day, I feel super fresh because that Gold Fusion anti-odor technology. At that wedding, I was dancing up a storm, wore it, no problems. So the Commuter Collection can get you through any work day and straight into whatever comes next. So head to Rhone.com/majority and use the promo code majority to save 20% off your entire order. That's 20% off your entire order when you head to RHONE.com/majority and use the code majority. It's time to find your corner office comfort. Lumen is the world's first handheld metabolic coach. It's a device that measures your metabolism through your breath. And on the app, it lets you know if you're burning fat or carbs and gives you tailored advice to improve your nutrition, workout, sleep, and even stress management. All you have to do is breathe into your Lumen first thing in the morning, and you'll know what's going on with your metabolism and whether you're burning mostly fats or carbs. And then Lumen gives you a personalized nutrition plan for that day based on your measurements. You could also breathe into it before and after workouts and meals, so you know exactly what's going on in your body in real time. And Lumen will give you tips to keep on top of your health game. This is really important. I've been running this fitness community for years, and often what I hear from people is, my metabolism is X, my metabolism is Y. But this actually gives you the data to actually confirm or in some ways challenge some assumptions you have about your body. And because your metabolism is at the center of everything your body does, optimal metabolic health translates to a bunch of benefits, including easier weight management, improved energy levels, better fitness levels, better sleep, and it could track your cycle as well as the onset of menopause and adjust your recommendations to keep your metabolism healthy through hormonal shifts so you can keep up your energy and stave off cravings. So if you want to take the next step in improving your health, go to lumen.me/majority to get 15% off your Lumen. That's LUMEN.me/majority for 15% off your purchase. Thank you, Lumen, for sponsoring this episode. Well, Stephen, Vice President Mike Pence just went on Fox News and had some pointed words about former President Trump. Let's go to the clip.
Come as no surprise that I will not be endorsing Donald Trump this year. Look, I'm incredibly proud of the record of our administration. It was a conservative record that made America more prosperous, more secure, and saw conservatives appointed to our course in a more peaceful world. But that being said, during my presidential campaign, I made it clear that there were profound differences between me and President Trump on a range of issues, and not just our difference on my constitutional duties that I exercised on January the 6th. I mean, as I have watched his candidacy unfold, I've seen him walking away from our commitment to confronting the national debt. I've seen him starting to shy away from a commitment to the sanctity of human life. And this last week, his reversal on getting tough on China and supporting our administration's effort to force a sale of ByteDance TikTok.
Why do you think he did that? Why do you think he had that reversal on that before we go, sir?
Well, I can't speculate on it, but what I can tell you is that in each of these cases, Donald Trump is pursuing and articulating an agenda that is at odds with the conservative agenda that we governed on during our 4 years. And that's why I cannot, in good conscience, endorse Donald Trump in this campaign. But let me say one last thing. That being said, look, Republican primary voters have made it clear, Martha, who they're for in this election. What I'm going to spend the rest of this year on is talking about what we should be for, and that is the broad mainstream conservative agenda that's defined our party and always made America strong and prosperous and free.
Well, understood. I got 2 seconds, but who are you going to vote for in November?
Well, like most Americans, I'm going to keep my vote to myself. But
would you vote for President Biden?
I would never vote for Joe Biden. But how I vote when that curtain closes is that'll be for me.
So maybe this was an old clip. That was maybe my bad.
I said, well, we're not going to do it for Joe Biden either. So I guess.
Yeah. Maybe that was old. Maybe that's my bad. So, okay, that's Pence. John Kelly also he confirmed this account on the troops that had been swirling around. And I think this is a good opportunity, given that you're a veteran, to talk about this. Vance made some comments about Afghan translators that I know Jason would want us to give voice to here. And that I think are clarifying. And then we've had this incident with Trump at the cemetery, which seems to have only escalated. Give us the lay of the land of where we are right now.
Yeah. So first up, Donald Trump's disrespect of the troops is a long established pattern. It is not a gaffe. It is not a mistake. It's not a bad day. It's not this is something that he's methodically been doing for almost a decade now. It goes back to originally insulting John McCain, saying he liked people that weren't captured, arguing with the Khan family, who was the Gold Star family back in 2016. So nothing here is particularly new. What's happened most recently is he tried to film a campaign event at Arlington National Cemetery in Section 60, where a lot of the Americans that were killed in the global war of terrorism are buried. And he's tried to turn that into a campaign thing. Do you want to play some of the clips? And I've got a couple of comments after that, or should I?
Yeah, go for it. Let's start with, do you want to start with McCain's son?
Yeah.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Oh, no, you want to tee it up?
Sure. So John McCain, obviously Republican senator who was shot down in Vietnam as a Navy pilot, was imprisoned for 6 years as a prisoner of war. And when Donald Trump, John McCain voted to actually is the final vote to not overturn the Affordable Care Act. And Trump was furious and has been attacking him sort of ever since. And so his son spoke up today, or a couple days ago, on the issue.
Were you going to become a Democrat either way, or did Kamala Harris play a role? And what has been the impact of the Arizona Republican Party on your beliefs?
I mean, I think the Arizona Republican Party is trying to express what they believe is the best. I mean, they did censor my mother and my entire family out of it. So, they're choosing the path that they want to go. But I think one of the main points of switching over and coming over has been, like I said, I feel that Kamala Harris and Tim Walz embody a group of people that will help make this country better, that will take us forward. And that's really what matters at the end of the day is, voting with your heart, voting how you feel going forward. And that's how I feel.
So a couple of things. One, Jim McCain, also a Marine veteran. I believe he served in Iraq. And I had a conversation with somebody the other day who actually, it mirrors very much what Jim McCain is saying. I talked to a 80-year-old man that I've known for about 20 years. And I'm a Marine veteran. I served in Iraq. And he's never said a word about that to me or anything. And I called him the other day and he went off on the phone, just went off about Donald Trump and the disrespect. And he said for the first time that he sent money to Kamala Harris, something he wouldn't typically do. And the reason he did that, this 80-year-old man was born in late June of 1944. And I didn't know any of this. And he told me that his father was killed in July 1944 in the breakout from Carrington in Normandy. And he never met his father, never knew him. And this 80-year-old man is so furious that Donald Trump would insult his dead father that he is backing Kamala for the first time in his life. And you think about somebody who grew up like that. And the one thing that he probably had his entire life, he grew up, I don't know his situation back in 1950 when he was 6 years old and didn't have a father. But the one thing that I'm confident is that everybody probably rallied around him and told him that his father was a hero. And that's something he's held on to for 80 years. And Donald Trump tried to shatter that. And so whether it's Jim McCain, who's leaving the Republican Party and registering as a Democrat because of Trump's history of insulting his father and among other things, or this 80-year-old man in Missouri who, people don't know. And I didn't even know that was the story of his family. He's changing because of this too. So these are real things that are grinding away at Trump's support. And I think he's gone too far.
Yeah. And, we alluded to the John Kelly comments. There, let's go to a clip where basically we get a little bit of context of what's going on here and why it matters.
The first time ever, Kelly sets the record straight with on-the-record confirmation of a number of damning details about Donald Trump from background sources, including from a 2020 Atlantic story reported with unnamed sources by editor-in-chief Jeffrey Goldberg, including the stunning detail that Trump turned to Kelly on Memorial Day at Arlington National Cemetery in 2017 and asked, "I don't get it. What was in it for them?" This is Kelly confirming on the record stories of Trump insulting Senator John McCain and former President George H.W. Bush because in Vietnam and in World War II, respectively, the former aviators were shot down. Kelly describes Trump as, quote, "a person that thinks those who defend their country in uniform or are shot down or seriously wounded in combat or spend years being tortured as POWs are all, quote, suckers because, quote, there is nothing in it for them. A person that did not want to be seen in the presence of military amputees because, quote, it doesn't look good for me. A person that demonstrated open contempt for a Gold Star family, for all Gold Star families on TV during the 2016 campaign."
One thing I would hope from John Kelly and McMaster and others is that they, and this is an important step, but let's hear from you on camera. And like, if what you're saying is true, I would love to hear about who you plan to vote for and who you think the electorate should vote for. I think we deserve that.
100%. I add, General Mattis to that list. And so for those that don't know, John Kelly, Marine Corps general, Donald Trump picked him as his chief of staff. So he's not some liberal leftist. His son was killed in Iraq. He was the most senior, I believe, serviceman to lose a child, a general to lose a child in Iraq. And so he's got tons of credibility on this. And I really, to your point, I really hope that he does speak up. The part that really stuck out to me, I mean, there's so much there, but that he didn't want to be seen with military amputees. So I was a Marine infantry. I fought in Fallujah. I led a squad there in 2006 and 2007. And my battalion took a lot of casualties in fighting in Fallujah in Iraq, in the city there. A lot of casualties. And one of the way that works, I mean, people wouldn't know this, but when you're training, you're together all the time. I mean, for months training, you go over to Kuwait, to Iraq. You're within 15, 20, 30 feet of people almost constantly for months. And then one day on a patrol, an IED goes off or a firefight happens or a grenade goes off and one of your guys gets hit and you call a medevac and they're taken away. They're just kind of whisked away and they're gone. And somebody that's been with you every single day for 6 months has been, never out of your sight, is suddenly gone. And when we came back, my battalion came back to California, we had a big memorial service for all the guys we lost. 22 guys in my battalion were killed. And we saw all these wounded guys that we hadn't seen, all of our guys that had been with us for months, and then they had been whisked away by the medevacs. And I remember walking to this gym at 29 Palms Marine Corps Base in California, and the entire back row is just wheelchairs. It's 19, 20, 21, 22-year-old guys who had been with us that had legs blown off and were paralyzed and were paraplegics and quadriplegics and lost limbs. And it was just the entire back row was these young, guys our age who look like kids now, who were sitting in their wheelchairs and were in for a president of the United States to say that he doesn't want to be seen with military amputees because it doesn't look good for him is absolutely unforgivable. And I really, really hope I argued with friends of mine who served. I don't know how anybody who served in the military votes for, quite frankly, a monster like that.
Well, on that note, and I'm really sorry for every loss in your battalion. And I think it's you kind of just wish that the person, we take for granted that even when it was Bush, who we had a lot of disagreements with, this was clearly a person who, I vehemently disagree with the decisions he made. he didn't have a fundamental lack of respect for the people in uniform, you know. And I think like and he felt like the worst president we've ever had.
Right.
And where we are now is so far beyond that, it's unthinkable. Well, let's take another break, and we're going to come back. We're going to talk about a really fascinating ABC News Washington Post poll, and then we're going to talk about the debate next week.
Typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk growing kids should never eat. That's why Hiya was created, the pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin. While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hiya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk, yet it tastes great and it's perfect for picky eaters, i.e. kids. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste that they love. Formulated with the help of nutritional experts, Hiya is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else that you can imagine. Hiya is designed for kids of all ages and sent straight to your door so parents have one less thing to worry about. As you know, I'm a father, and I'm always on the lookout for the best possible vitamins for my child to take. I'm so happy that I've come across Hiya Health. The ingredients are amazing, and I don't have to worry about sugar or gummy junk because Hiya Health is made without that stuff and is still able to keep the great taste, which is super important because that's how you get kids to eat it. We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/majority. This deal is not available on the regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/majority and get your kids the full body nourishment that they need to grow into healthy adults.
All right. Well, there are a lot of polls that come out, but the most high quality in the past week is the ABC News Washington Post poll. It shows Harris with a 4-point lead over Trump. And it's kind of, one way to think about it is it's mixed results. Like it has the largest gender gap that we've seen, and there's a lot of interesting crosstabs. But at the same time, it also has, it suggests that in the way that what ABC News Washington Post wrote it up is that there was no convention bounce as they see it. Which I think is interesting. And I think it prompts the question of like, where are we in this race right now? And I want to provide some context for the audience here. And I have an extended explainer in a second. We'll link to, and I'll explain where people can go to my YouTube page where I do a longer explanation of these crosstabs. But, Nate Silver has a model where he basically describes like, what does it take for Democrats to win? And I think this is some sobering information. Number one is he takes into account that there should be a post-convention bounce. So he kind of discounts polls by a couple points at this period of time post-convention because historically there's some kind of temporary inflation of the numbers. But the most important thing he does is he takes into account what he calls the electoral college bias. And the way he quantifies this is that if Harris is up 0 to 1% in the national polls, her chance of winning are only about 10%. If she takes 1 to 2% of the popular vote, her chance is up to 31%. She'd have to get somewhere between 2 to 3% to cross the 50% threshold, and really to truly be in a commanding position and to be fairly certain that you're in good shape. We're talking about plus 80% chance of winning the election. She needs to be 3 to 4% up in the popular vote. So that's pretty sobering, meaning like when you're reading these polls, post-convention bounce plus electoral college bias, you really want to be up 6 right now in order to say you're truly leading. And we're really up 4. So we're still underdogs in this race.
That's pretty wild. The convention part, I'm a little bit less worried about that just because this has been such a compressed summer. I mean, this has just been a unique situation. And so I feel in a way like normally there's a long primary and then you kind of know who's going to win. And then there's kind of this dead period and then there's a convention. And so the way that this worked out this summer, with everything kind of happening suddenly, I don't know if the convention was as big a deal. So that doesn't concern me as much. What you said about the Electoral College is 100% true, and also just kind of wild that you can be up by 2 points in the popular vote and only have a 10% chance of winning because the way the Electoral College works out. I mean, that's maybe a separate conversation, but that's kind of a nuts way to do things. But to your point, like this, and I actually don't worry about Dems becoming overconfident, but this really shows how hard we have to run through the tape and how we have to just keep driving all the way through election day.
Well, it's a good transition to talk about this debate, which is next week, which I think is next Tuesday. And I think it's clear, it's safe to say that this is the most important remaining predictable moment in the campaign cycle. And I'm a little worried is the wrong term, not worried, but I am focused on the perceptions game here, because I think we're so exuberant as Democrats. You know, there's this sense that Harris has largely had a flawless start. That if the same ABC News Washington Post poll showed that Americans expect Harris to be better than Trump, which sounds like a good news, but is actually bad news because expectations are so ingrained in this. So like, if you remember George W. Bush, everybody thought he was dumb and whatever. And the expectations were that Gore is like, you know, amazing. Same thing with Kerry. I think, you know, Karl Rove or somebody said that, you know, Kerry is the best debater since Cicero or something leading up to that debate. And what that does mean that you have to cross a higher threshold. You have to do even better for people to say you won the debate. So I'm a little bit concerned about that.
Yeah. What you said there was smart in terms of this is the biggest known thing we have remaining, right? So there might be something kind of left field. There might be an event. There might be a revelation. There might be a gaffe that we don't know about. But in terms of things that we know are happening in the next 2 months, this is the single biggest moment that's left. I think Kamala has to keep doing what she did in the convention, which, you know, she's been the vice president, obviously, but she's kind of still introducing herself to not to people like us or people listening to the pod who know, but to, you know, swing voters, folks who check in late, who tune in late, who haven't been following everything. She's still kind of introducing herself. So that's something that she has to do. And then I think she just has to keep her coalition together. And that's what she's been doing. I mean, we've spent the last 40 minutes talking about how Trump's has been unraveling and how he's contradicted himself multiple times and multiple things, and they're starting to be infighting. I think she just has to keep being sort of that happy warrior and keeping the joy and keeping pressing the attack and keep pushing forward and keeping her coalition together. I think she can do that.
Well, I spent the past few weeks watching every available debate since 1960, and I did
You're a sick man, Ravi. You're a sick man.
I did a history on this, and for those who listen to the Israel-Palestine history that I did, it's very much of that style. The difference on this one is we also immediately are putting it on YouTube, and as we're recording this on YouTube, it's going up within a couple hours. But in a second, I'm going to play a clip of this, and for folks who are interested in really nerding out. I mean, in the first part, I go from 1960 to 2004, which I call the TV history. I go from Kennedy and Nixon, which is really fascinating, through the Kerry-Bush debates and kind of pull out what does it mean to win a debate, what are the things that we've learned, et cetera. You can go to the Lost Debate podcast if you want to listen on audio, or you can go to our YouTube page, which we're going to link to in the show notes. But here's like an example of it. This is from a moment of George H.W. Bush versus Clinton, which is one of my favorite sort of series of debates that we've had out there. Third moment / takeaway here is that, you know, Bush, who, you know, basically won the body language sort of grades in 2000, had his own bad body language moment in these debates. Here's an excerpt from a PBS segment years later where Bush kind of talks about this body language problem that he had in these debates.
An opportunity to show the upside of what I was thinking and the downside of what he was thinking.
At the same time, George Bush was criticized for being overly expressive during that debate, much like Al Gore was in 2000.
I guess I didn't learn any lessons from the first debate in 2000. I thought I did pretty well in the first debate, and it was, you're not going to believe your facial expressions caused people to say you didn't do very well.
Mr. President, for the record, I had exactly the same experience. When the first question was asked, I looked at you and you had a facial expression, and I decided then I would never look at anybody except the person who was talking.
Yeah.
And so when it was over, I also did not know about the facial expressions.
I think I was just being myself. I was just like, probably saying, I can't believe this guy's saying that, or I wasn't trying to be rude.
Well, this was an even different clip. I like this one too. Yeah, I was thinking of the one where Butch was looking at his watch, which I analyzed like the Zapruder film essentially in this thing. But what's interesting is like this is an important point where, and I think Biden, if you go back to the Biden performance, one of the big takeaways in these debates and watching all of these things and thinking about how they impacted races is that who wins the debate is not the person who wins the debate. Meaning if you're just thinking about it as a debater, who made this point, who countered it and all that, that has nothing to do with what the public thinks after the debate. What they think about is how do you look? How do you seem? Do you like, unfortunately, are you likable? Are you confident? Are you commanding? And this goes all the way back to 1960, where famously it was the first televised debate, and Nixon won. When they asked people who were listening on radio, people thought Nixon won that debate because he was like, more logical and more prepared and substantive, et cetera. But when more people tuned in on TV, they kept doing cutaways of Nixon, and he looked horrible in those cutaways, and that started this this trend, which is that these moments, often when you're not even speaking, can really matter. And if you remember the Biden debate, there were some really unfortunate cutaways there. And I think this gets to Harris, which is this is the hardest thing in politics, because yes, you have to be substantive and all that kind of stuff, but that's really just a box to check, right? Like knowing that you're prepared, knowing that you can recite the right line and and speak with some authority on policy is a prerequisite for somebody like Harris, but is not going to win you the debate. What's going to win you the debate is if you find the perfect mix of being forward enough to seem commanding and strong without being so aggressive that people think you're caustic or whatever. And honestly, Stephen, this is the hardest balancing act in politics.
It really is. Another, even drilling down further, is back to the Electoral College. They're not even necessarily debating for the entire country. They're debating for pockets of people around the country. And so you can think that somebody won the debate, but if so-and-so made a really good point that is salient in Arizona on a very specific issue, that can actually be winning the debate, right? Because we're talking about getting small groups of voters in very specific places and not just winning nationwide. I think that you're 100% right. Like that the public perception will be written based on, quite frankly, some really dumb things, right? Like where somebody glances when they're not talking or whatever. But as folks, and I assume most people listening to this pod are obviously part of the majority 54, they're part of pro Kamala. Like we cannot get sucked into this. Like if democracy is truly on the line, and I believe that it is, and if all these policies are on the line, and I believe that they are, we're not going to go along with some media who's trying to keep a 50-50 race. If they start trying to spin some narrative about Kamala, she glanced the wrong way when Trump was talking. Like, no, like when we're talking to our friends, when we're, interacting on social media, when we're, volunteering, like we're going to keep the main thing, and we're going to not take the bait. And I think Democrats are getting a lot better at not taking the media bait because we're not going to determine whether America is a democracy moving forward based on where somebody glanced when somebody else was talking.
Yeah, it was interesting. One of the fascinating historical artifacts I turned up was 2000. A younger Jon Stewart goes on Matt Lauer Today's Show and is asked, he's pressed really by Lauer to say, well, who would you rather have a beer with? And Lauer knows the answer to the question because everybody says Bush, right? And Stewart had an interesting reaction to that reminds me of what you just said, which he said, who do I want to have a beer with? He's like, I want my president to be the designated driver. I don't want to have a beer with either of them. And I think about that now, which first of all, I think Harris is an infinitely more relatable person. So I think she has an advantage here, but I also think it's the wrong question to ask.
I felt that way when they were asking about, what she would do in her first day as president. Like, I don't care. I take a nap. I don't care.
Yeah.
I care about what she does over 4 years. I care about what she does in terms of putting together legislative coalitions and passing legislation that takes months and months and years and lots of time. And I'm not going to, freak out because she doesn't spend the first 4 hours as president the way I want her to. And so there's going to be some dumb narratives like that we're going to have to push back on. But to your point, like, while they are ridiculous, they do matter because that does shape the media that people consume and ultimately how they vote. And that's what does matter.
Yeah. And she's preparing. That's one thing we know. They have a veteran of debate prep, but who's a new sort of leader on this, which is Karen Dunn, my former boss, really talented. And I'm actually pretty happy to get to some young.
Bam! No.
You yelling at your dogs?
Sorry.
I'm excited to see that they're preparing. And one thing about Trump is that I'm sure there's something resembling prep going behind the scenes, but I can't imagine that he's as diligent as Harris is. And I am pretty. I rest well at night knowing that David Plouffe is there, Karen Dunn is there. Like, we've got real pros there who know how to handle a situation like this, and they know the stakes. And I think that's Tuesday night, which means we'll be right back here next week, the next day, to talk about what happened in those debates. And so I'm really excited about that. But Stephen, thank you for joining us. What a week. So much happening. There's a bunch we didn't even get to in this, but that's how it's going to be from here on out. Pennsylvania is coming up. I think it's like the Pennsylvania early vote is later this month. So I think, basically election day is coming.
Yeah, it's not just one day anymore, right? There's one big day, but there's weeks that precede that with early voting. And so you're right. This is coming quick. So thanks very much for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Yes, and everybody out there, just make sure to tweet at Jason about Harrison Butker and his political views, Brittany Mahomes and her alleged political views, and just the Chiefs franchise in general and the moral rot that we've all witnessed, and that I really don't have enough time or energy to give justice to. Stephen, sorry, we don't have any time for rebuttal. That's it. That's the end of this podcast. Thank you. Thank you very much, everybody.